concluding chapter 3 of part 2. In the account already referred to in Genesis 18, one of Abraham's 3 guests, distinguished by the dignity of his person, announces himself as the angel of Jehovah. In Genesis 22, Abraham receives a command from God. Elohim is the word here, to offer up a son. Now, the spelling Elohim is sometimes what's there, and sometimes Elohim. In the act of obedience, he is stopped by Melech Jehovah, or the angel of Jehovah, who says, "Now I know that thou fearest God, since thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me." Abraham called the place Jehovah Jireh. Jehovah will provide. Ur is something to do with something being brought with the hand, right? Which shows that he believed that he had seen Jehovah. No, not quite. An epiphany or a hierophany is not the same thing as a theophany, and sometimes a theophany is not the same thing as saying that you saw God. That God was made known in a place, sure. That God specifically sanctified a particular thing that went on, and as a revelation, but it wasn't, But let's remember, in the Quran, there's a difference here. The Quran doesn't say that Abraham said to sacrifice the son. In Exodus 3, angel of Jehovah appears to Moses in the flaming bush and ascribes to him all the attributes of the true God. Of course, as the part where he says, "Well, I know you're righteous," and that sort of stuff, that kind of happened. But not those words where, you've done enough with the dream, basically, not that, Anyways, Moses covers his face, being afraid to look upon God. In Exodus 32, the angel of Jehovah refuses to be any more the guide of the people Israel after their sin in worshiping the golden calf. He afterwards relents. In Judges 2, the angel of Jehovah appears to the Israelites in a place which is afterwards called Bakim, and makes himself known as their deliverer from Egypt. In chapter 6, he appears to Gideon, and in verse 14, he is called unqualifiedly Jehovah. In verse 22, Gideon expresses a fear lest he might die, having seen the angel of Jehovah. Being pacified by the august being, he erects an altar, which he calls Jehovah Shalom, Jehovah's peace. In chapter 13 is the interesting story of Manoah, when the wonder-working visitor disappeared in the flame. Then Manoah was convinced that he was the angel of Jehovah. And in verse 22, he says to his wife, "We shall surely die because we have seen God." And some of these terms could have been a vision of God or something like that, but that's not this, it's not that you see God. I don't know the exact words. We'll have to go over this when we read through Tanakh. And it's in 2 Kings 19, the angel of Jehovah destroyed the Assyrian host, which threatened destruction to the theocracy. In Isaiah 63:9, the angel Jehovah is called the angel of his presence, that is, the angel of his face. In Zechariah, Melech Jehovah is very frequently mentioned. The prophet receives all his revelations from this wonderful being. In chapter 2, verses 12 through 15, he is distinguished from Jehovah of hosts, by whom he represents himself as sent. Yet, the prophet seems to give him the name of Jehovah of hosts here in chapter 6 15. The 8th verse of chapter 12 is remarkable. There, Melech Jehovah, the angel of Jehovah, is spoken of as being equal in dignity and glory with Elohim, God. Compare Psalm 34:7 with Psalm 35:5, where the protection of the good and the punishment of the wicked are ascribed to the angel of Jehovah, an administration of moral government, which is elsewhere ascribed to Jehovah himself. Now, just like we see with the Shem HaBorash, or we see in the Enochian system, as it's called, with the governor names and the senior names and stuff like this, God works through those areas. But, God has put agents, you could say. It must be noted that in all the passages cited above, the original is referred to, and not the English version, which, however, is ordinarily quite close enough for all practical purposes. These remarkable passages show that while the Jews held the doctrine that there was one uncreated supreme being, God Jehovah, Elohim, uncreated one creator, they believed that there was one who was the revealer of Jehovah, head of the world, ruler of the princes of the angels, Metatron, mediator, that they could have borrowed from. The remarkable idea of the Persians is apparent from the fact that it pervades all their books regarded as sacred, those written before as well as those written after they had been submitted to the influence of Orientalism. Well, virtually everything we have has no manuscript of pre-Babylonian and Assyrian captivity, but Hengstenberg uses the facts in this case to show that the angel of Jehovah was Christ, a being equal in dignity and glory with the great God. A remarkable little book by Professor McWhorter of Yale College is entitled Yahweh Christ, or the memorial name. It holds that, 1, the name is not Jehovah, signifying I am, but Yahweh, the one to come, equivalent to the Greek O Erchomenos, Ho Erchomenos, the one coming. The difference being in the vowels, the Jewish prejudice, making the former reading while the latter is correct. Well, there's, linguistic things, right? That the right reading is the angel Jehovah and not the angel of Jehovah, the latter word being appositional, and that this memorial name is complete in Christ. Linguistically, see, the Hebrew prejudice is that because the Yah, L, whatever the Y-H-A-L, Aleph, Lamed, Yud, Hey, whatever names you're going to have for those letters, but if it ends in that, you're not talking about a deity. It's not a prejudice, it's called knowing the language. But readers who wish to examine the subject more thoroughly are referred to the Christology of the Old Testament by Hengstenberg, Volume 1, Chapter 3, in which he will find a very able and learned treatise on the Metatron with an interesting comparison of Jewish and Persian teaching on those quotations. Also Professor McWhorter's book just mentioned, and Bibliotheca Sacra, Volume 859, page 805, an article on the angel of Jehovah, January 1857, page 98. These we have used only so far as they bore upon the subject we have in view in this biography of Jesus. And one of the things that we can look at is this term, Yahweh, coming from the ancient Egyptian, the heh part of it, and the Yah or Ewa or something. It's the lunar and the solar, the cyclical and the linear. The Ha is the eternal element, and Yah the changing. That's not quite the right term, because ever changing yet ever the same. But anyways, it's a formula. A lot of these deity names are formulas. It's like Allah is God as a noun and verb as well. It's also the astonishing, also the power, and so the idea of there being no other ilaha, or it's that there's everything relies on God for its power, so that those things aren't that. It's not that these things don't exist per se, either as subjective or objective, To Jesus, when he fainted in his bodily collapse after this fact, and his mental exhaustion after the severe spiritual conflicts through which he passed in his temptation, there came angels ministering to him what he needed, whatever was necessary to refresh him in body and in soul, food and tenderness and sympathy.